Thank you, Clint. I guess I should say thank you for that introduction. No, really, Clint has been a great friend of mine over the past many years of my life in Haiti and my journey in Haiti and learning about community development. Clint has been a great mentor of mine and has been very influential in my time there. And I just want to start by saying I've been extremely blessed by being here at this conference, and I really appreciate the foundation that has been laid by the previous people speaking about community development. I think when I was putting my talk together, I several times kind of struggled with feeling like my talk is sounding or is going to come across like a system that I want you to go implement somewhere in the tropics or somewhere in a developing country. And I think my goal is more to maybe try to make sense of some methods and ways that we can implement, but remember to always do them through the lenses of everything that we have heard already. I'm not promoting in any way you to go to another country and show up and do exactly what I'm showing you here, because it's not going to work. As much as I failed in the things that I did, and for the reasons maybe that I'll share that you can avoid, trying to duplicate what I'm doing is not the right answer either. So we need to remember to stick to the principles of what we've heard already. And I just want to start by saying I'm not an expert. I'm not a biologist or anybody with a lot of great knowledge, but I'm a farmer that has learned a lot in the School of Hard Knocks, and I hope to maybe share a little bit of some of the things that I have learned in my time in Haiti. So I need to try and navigate this two-pointer method thing that we got going on here. But so my talk is on plant diversity. Which one of these? And which button do I hit? Okay, there we go. So this is back and that's forward, and this is point. Okay, so we do just have one. I was under the impression we had two. All right, so this is a picture of my family. We have been living in Haiti since 2014, working you guys heard some of my story last night. I guess there's some of you that weren't here last night, but working with a small organization that started doing community development work in 2013. And a lot of our work in community development work has been with agriculture. And so a lot of my talk today is focused on plant diversity. And so I want to start with, saying that he is the creator of all things. For by him were all things created, that are in heaven and that are in earth, visible and invisible, whether they be thrones or dominions or principalities or powers. All things were created by him and for him. So I was going to spend a little bit more time in the beginning of my talk with some Bible verses and talking about maybe the theology behind why part of my journey, and how that part of the reason why I do things the way I do now is because I believe it's the biblical way to do things. But because we've had a lot of other speakers that have echoed those things and already portrayed a lot of those thoughts, I'm not going to spend a lot of time, and I'm going to blow through a little bit in the beginning here, and maybe spend a little bit more time on the plants later. So, but I do want to say that we are stewards of God's creation, and I do feel like we heard that having dominion and the mandate that God gave us to have dominion, I feel like is often misunderstood, and we turn it into growing the things that make the most money and doing it in the way that the industries around us are doing it in ways that are most convenient. And I would ask the question if most times it has more to do with the money and what's the most convenient than it does following God's design. And then in Genesis chapter 2, verse 15, and the Lord God took man and put him into the Garden of Eden to dress it and to keep it. And I would say earlier on in my life, I felt like working the soil and hard work and farming was a part of the fall. And here we see this is the warped thinking. We were designed. God put man into the garden to dress it and to keep it from the beginning. It's something that was designed. It's the way that it was meant to be, is for us to work with our hands. And then in Genesis chapter 1, at the end of the account with creation, and God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. And the evening and the morning were the sixth day. So I'm going to start with talking about everything that God created as it relates to plants. Does anyone want to take a shot? And if you already know, I'm sure there's many people in this room that already know this answer probably. So if you do, just wait a little bit. Does anyone want to take a shot at how many plant species there are in the world? And this number is it can vary quite a bit depending on opinion. 20,000. Any more? Million? 20 million? 200,000 I heard. That's getting pretty close. So depending on who you talk to, 350 to 400,000 species of plants in the world. Of those 350 to 400,000 species of plants in the world, there are approximately 20,000 species of edible plants. Fewer than 200 species have significant production levels globally, and 20 species provide 90% of our food. Now, I tried to do I wanted to get a list up of these 20 species that produce 90% of our food, and I had some struggles trying to find this. So I did some looking, and I found another paper that was a little bit older, that was from the Food and Agriculture Association of the United Nations, which is where I got a lot of this information from. But I found an older paper from them that said, is from 2011, 75% of the world's food supply comes from 12 plants and 5 animal species. Do we have any guesses what the number one plant species is? Corn, rice, wheat, beans, potatoes. No. Any more? Cassava, yucca, no. What? Lettuce, no. Beans, no. Sweet potatoes, no. It's okay, I couldn't have got it either. Sugar. 1,800,375,000 metric tons of sugar in 2011. The next one's coming after that is maize, rice, and wheat. So you guys were right, maize, rice, and wheat. Those are the ones that came to my mind right away. And yeah, so we're not going to go over all the others, but yeah, we see sugar production is more than 1 billion tons more than anything else on that list.
The maize would be corn, right?
Maize would be corn, correct, yeah. Maize would be corn. So, every herb bearing seed and every tree. And God said, behold, I have given you every herb bearing seed, which is upon the face of the earth, and every tree, in the which is fruit of the tree yielding seed to you, and it shall be for meat. And to every beast of the earth, and to every fowl of the air, and to everything that creepeth upon the earth, wherein there is life, I have given every green herb for meat. But still, more than 680 million people are affected by hunger today, or 8.9% of world population. An estimated 2 billion people did not have regular access to safe, nutritious, and sufficient food in 2019. So I know that these, I'm taking a little bit of an approach to, would you say, the marginalized farmers, subsistent farmers, and a lot of that has to do because that is the group of people that I'm working with, and I'm assuming a lot of you here, as you go and work with subsistence farmers, one thing that is, this thing is a much more dire subject. Tim talked about how that the marginalized have a very small margin. Things like plant diversity and crop diversity to someone like us as Americans growing up in America, if we plant a monocrop and it fails, we might have some problems paying the bills, or we might have some difficulties, but our family is not going to go hungry in the way that a lot of the people that we're going to go work with would be affected by it. And so we need to be very conscious of that going into work in other cultures. I know when I first showed up and people were planting, we were irrigating and people were planting beans and corn and everything together, and we're like, I don't know what they're doing. Like, it's just like you plant corn by itself. Like, everyone knows you don't plant beans and corns together. And that's very much to my shame of some of the mindsets that I had when I showed up and started working. So to go over some of those plant dispersals to make it a little bit more understanding, make it a little bit more clear for us, let's talk about it in percentages. The 20,000 edible species of plants that there are is only 5% of plants. 5 to 5.5, depending on if we have 350,000 or 400,000 species of plants. The 200 species of edible plants with significant production is only 1% of all edible plants. And if there's someone that's a math whiz, tell me what percent that is. 0.0005% of all plants are made up of the 200 species. And then the 20 species that supply approximately 90% of the world's plant-based population is only 1/100% of all edible plants. So 90% of our food comes from 1/100% of edible plants. We need plant diversity, not monocrops. Like I said, this is especially true for subsistence farmers in developing countries. They're more vulnerable when things don't work out, like I shared. It's very bad. People will go hungry. And they don't have the fertilizers and the pesticides and the things that we think is normal, because we are coming from a context where often monocultures are grown because that's just how we do things here in the United States, right? It doesn't work like that in developing contexts where plants need to develop and grow in the natural ecosystems that God designed for them to be in. And then often another thing that's a big reason why monocrops can be very detrimental to people in developing countries is cash markets. Cash markets, often people don't have great markets, and so if they have one huge crop of corn, they might not even be able to sell it when they harvest it. So that's another big problem. So a little bit about my story. I grew up as a dairy farmer kid in Holmes County, Ohio. My uncle was an orchard farmer, and I worked some on the orchard growing up. And so the picture I had in my mind of fruit trees when I went to Haiti and I started planting fruit trees was what we see here. Rows of fruit trees with grass in the middle of them. And I went to Haiti and I started planting fruit trees, and I still remember after like the first, I think it was probably close to 2 years of planting fruit trees and probably at least 80% of the fruit trees I planted dying, I was like, well, I don't even know what I'm doing here. This is not working. And I remember, I don't know what year it was. Mike, is Mike here? Mike's not here. Okay, you remember what year it was when we visited you out at your house? Anyway, you probably won't remember. That's a bunny trail, but probably around 2017, I visited Mike's place, and I remember walking around the back of his house and walking through his garden, and he had all kinds of vetiver grass growing everywhere, and trees were just like planted here and here and here, and they weren't in rows, but still they were like spaced perfectly. And I was like, wow, how does he do this? And I was like, man, he's got mulch on these trees. And I remember thinking earlier on, I was like, well, I wish I just had a place to buy mulch when I first started growing trees in Haiti. And it never dawned on me that I could grow the mulch. And I still remember walking through Mike's garden and just being like, he's growing everything right here that he needs for his plants. And this was where I started to look into systems of what we call agroforestry, which is a more modern term that we like to use, and something that I want to say up front before I start talking more about agroforestry is not a new thing. Agroforestry is not something that was developed by agronomists or new systems. It's a way of farming and a methodology that is very indigenous in the way that people have been farming for thousands of years. And so we're just now learning more, especially those of us in the Western world that are used to monocultures and the way that things have been done. We're learning more about agroforestry, and so it's not a new thing. It's not something that I have come up with, or even people recently have come up with. To talk a little bit about agroforestry, which I'll get into a little bit more here, is the use of using trees along with agriculture. And there's several different mixes of that, which we'll go through more. But here we see the 7 layers of a food forest. This is from the School of Permaculture. We have different layers that we focus on using and utilizing as much space as we can use in a garden. We have the overstory tree layer, the understory tree layer. I keep hitting the wrong button, I apologize. The overstory tree layer, the understory tree layer, the shrub layer, the herbaceous layer, the root layer, the ground cover layer, and then a vining layer that is going to climb up on the trees. So this is an example of one type of agroforestry that is trying to utilize as much space as we can have in a garden, and we're going to go through some more images of this. I will say that one thing that I feel like these are not my pictures. This is from the School of Permaculture, and so I'm not here to add one thing on there, but I do disagree with it a little bit. Where I would agree a little bit more with this approach of layers to the agroforestry systems, which is from a syntropical agriculture system, which is pretty much the same, but adds an emergent layer, which is often like very long-living hardwood trees, trees that reach way up above everything else, and often that can be an added layer that can be in an agroforestry system up above a lot of the other fruit trees and food producing trees that you have in the bottom. So to talk about some of the categories of agroforestry, there are multiple combinations of agroforestry that you can use. The first one that I'm going to talk about is agro-silviculture. So agro stands for agriculture, and silviculture stands for the use of trees. So this system here is a system that we would call agro-silviculture, where we have agriculture, raised beds, and papayas growing here, and then we have wood trees, biomass trees growing here in the rows that are probably serving as shade and biomass production and all that good stuff. Then we have a silvopastoral system, which is pasture and trees. So trees, pasture. And here we have the trees growing in rows with grass down the centers. This looks like Tithonia diversifolia, which is Mexican sunflower, very nutritious and good for building soil. And then these trees, I'm sure, are being cut too as fodder for the cows. And when you're growing forage in layers, the grass can still grow in underneath the trees, but you're also producing up on top and shade. And when you're in the tropics, having a little bit of shade can really increase the production of what's growing underneath it. And then here we have what they call agri-silvo-pastoral. So agriculture, trees, and pasture all in the same one. So grass rows down the center where you could run cows or sheep, or not goats. And fruit trees growing in the rows, and then also other agriculture things growing among those. So sorry I had to make that joke. Coming from Haiti, we have a good hatred for goats. They have good uses, but they can also be very destructive when they get around agricultural plants and trees. So that's take that for what it's worth. So those are the three categories of what we think of as agroforestry. I want to talk a little bit more about syntropical agriculture, which syntropical agriculture is a newer method that was produced or was put together by a scientist from Germany that lives in Brazil. His name is Ernst Gosch, and I probably butchered his name, but something like that. And it's a method that how would you say? It's a system that has been put together for doing agroforestry, and it can be modified. It can be all three of the agriculture systems that I was just talking about, but it's more a planting system. It's more there's literature and stuff available for if you're wanting to incorporate or establish agroforestry systems that kind of more helps you understand what to do it. When I walked into Mike's garden and I looked at it, I was like, there's no way I can plant things like this because I don't understand which tree to plant where and how to do things. Where this system here is more if you're new and you're trying to learn, this is something that's good for you to maybe use to have a little bit of a better, how would you say, comprehend maybe a little bit better where to start and how to start putting things together. So I want to talk about 4 categories of plants to emphasize, and I want to go over these, and then I'm going to kind of talk about each one of these 4. And these are just 4 that I put together. I'm sure there's many more that you could add to it, or I probably missed some or said some things wrong in the way that I put these together. But yeah, these are 4 as I thought about food security and working in developing countries especially, kind of the 4 things that I would say are the most important to kind of think about when you're trying to incorporate plant diversity in your areas where you're working. So the first category of plants that I would say that's important to emphasize is perennials. Well, I guess I'm not going to spend a lot of time here. I'll get back over that one. Perennials, underutilized plants, and I say underutilized plants a lot. I'm not talking about underutilized crops. Underutilized crops is a part of underutilized plants, but there are a lot of plants that are underutilized. The plants that Brother Roman was talking about the forbs is an example of an underutilized plant. It has a role to play. It was created by God. It's not a weed. A weed is what? A misplaced plant, a plant that's out of place. So a lot of times what we call a weed might not actually be a weed. It might be serving its purpose that God created it to do. So we need to remember that. Nutrient dense. This is a big one. Especially when we're working with people that are in areas where nutrition is a problem when we're trying to address food security. And then season stretching is another one that I believe is a tremendous one that has tons of potential to make a big difference in the communities where you'll be working in. So Perennial crop emphasis. Why perennial crops? The first one that I would say would be less labor. You don't have to plant it every year. You plant it once, and if it's something like a tree, once it gets over 3 to 4 foot tall, even most goats can't get it anymore. So that's number one. More tolerant to weather, droughts, flooding. And I know that this is not all perennials necessarily, but generally speaking, more tolerant to drought and flooding, more tolerant to extreme temperatures, and then pests, insects, and then also mammals, free range, which I said like the goats. Much more protected when you're talking about perennials. The insect one, I would say, is a big one about the insects too, is just when you have enough diversity. One of the things that Roman talked about was, well, if you have a pest, it means that there's something missing in your garden. Maybe not. It starts in the soil, but it could be a pest. It could be a predator that's missing in your ecosystem where you're growing. But when you have lots of diversity, those things will disappear. And then, diversification. That's what I was just talking about there. Our crop consortiums rarely include sufficient representation of perennials. And then again, this reduces vulnerability, especially to subsistence farmers. Underutilized plants. I would say in general, one of the top plants that are underutilized is trees. And maybe namely fruit trees, because we can be growing trees and they can be producing food for us. And then number two, nurse plants. Biomass plants, fertility champions, plants that are going to produce tons of plant material to create mulch, and plants that are bringing up minerals from the ground, and when they decompose, releasing those minerals into the top of the soil for your plants. Cover crops or relay cropping. And so I made a little bit of a list here, and I'm not an expert at all in temperate climate stuff, but I put some of these things in here, and there's probably people in this room that would have better plants to put on here. But some plants that I put on that are maybe underutilized plants for temperate climates would be persimmons, cherries, mulberries, sweet potatoes, Chinese yam, which is the Latin name is right there, perennial onions, and then I put in herbs, flowering plants. What I meant by that was non-grass herbs, especially forbs, as we heard earlier, and then tropical and subtropical. Artocarpus, the genus of Artocarpus, which is breadfruit and jackfruit and breadnut. These plants are tremendous, and we'll talk more about the breadfruit when we get into the nutrient-dense plants. These plants, a lot of the fruit, the nut, especially jackfruit, the seed, the flesh of the fruit can be ate, the nut can be roasted and eaten like chestnuts. And then some other ones are yam, taro, amaranth, jute mallow, chaya, sasha inchi, Tithonia diversifolia, Mexican sunflower. And then arid, semi-arid. I don't have much experience at all for this one. I messaged Mike and I asked him for some examples, and he didn't really come through for me, but that's okay. The few that I put in here was cacti. One of the reason why I put in cacti is cactuses. What most people don't understand is almost all fruits on cactuses are edible, and there's lots of semi-arid areas that have these huge cactuses. Like out in the area where Mike lives, for anyone that's ever been there, has huge cactuses growing, and they have these little fruits that grow on them. You have to be careful because a lot of them have hair or needles on them that are almost like fiberglass, and if you get them in your throat, it's not a pleasant experience, but you can eat them. And then prickly pear is a big one. This is one that's eaten a lot in Mexico, in cuisine in Mexico, I think, but in a lot of cultures like Haiti, it grows all over the place but is not eaten. And then chaya. And so, sorry if I'm going over a bunch of plants that no one's ever heard of, but I wanted to go over these, and I think it's important to have some of these lists, as a lot of us that go into developing countries are going to go work in the kind of belt that goes around, and the tropical, subtropical areas is where a lot of hunger and malnourishment is going on. And so, nutrient dense. I just have a few examples here. We have breadfruit, Barbados cherries, amaranth, moringa, and chaya. And I'm going to go over these and make some comparisons with things that I'm going to explain more what each one of these are, and then make some comparisons with fruits that are familiar to us. So with the breadfruit, this is breadfruit. This is in the genus of Artocarpus that I talked about earlier. This fruit is like a potato on a tree. And I could probably talk for 45 minutes about this tree by itself, because this tree is awesome. If you go and you live somewhere that has sufficient rainfall, one of the biggest downfalls of this tree is if you're in a dry climate, you're not going to have enough rain for it. But I think if you have anything over like probably 36 inches of annual rain, or somewhere around 1,000 millimeters or so, you can probably grow this tree. And so to make some comparisons, it's basically like a potato on a tree. And so to make some comparisons, breadfruits and potatoes, this is 1 cup of fruit. We see the calories are basically the same. One of the big ones is carbohydrates, 60%, which is double of a potato. And carbohydrates is a big thing for people that are struggling with malnutrition. Getting enough energy in your body can be a real struggle. Fiber, 10.8%, which is 38% of your daily value need, versus a potato, 3%. I'm sorry. Did I say 10.8%? It's 10.8 grams, 38% of daily value need. So to explain this, the percentages here is what you are, the amount of percent that you need for a daily value based on 2,000 calorie diet. And this is the first level is the amount. And then another big one for breadfruit is potassium. It has over 1,000 milligrams of potassium, which is 25% of your daily need for potassium, and 63 milligrams of vitamin C, which is 25% of your, 70% of your daily needs. So as you can see, I think it pretty much outdoes the potato in everything other than iron. Protein. The potato has just a little bit more protein as well. But in most of those things, it is quite a bit more nutritious than a potato. And it's a perennial tree. It grows up in the air. It's way easier to grow than potatoes. Barbados cherry. Barbados cherry is a little sour cherry that grows in a lot of the tropics. And this thing is crazy concentrated with vitamin C. One cherry has 4.8 grams, or one cherry that weighs 4.8 grams has 80.5 milligrams of vitamin C, which is 89% of your daily need of vitamin C. And if you compare it with oranges, which supposedly have vitamin C, 100 grams of oranges has 76 grams, which is 85% of your daily need. 100 grams of Barbados cherries has 1,677 milligrams of vitamin C in them. So this is an example of one that grows in the tropics and is very easy to grow and is a superfood. Amaranth. How many people here are feeling a little bit uneasy about this one? Oh, you're loving it.
We eat it.
Okay, well, you're not corn farmers then.
We harvest stuff like this in our garden.
Okay. So coming from Iowa, if I was standing up in front of a crowd of people telling people that you should grow pigweed, the farmers would all be like, "Are you crazy?" But yeah, this is a great vegetable that the people of Haiti grow and love. This is a staple food in the areas where I come from. And so when I showed up and I saw this fruit there already, this was not something that I had to introduce or do anything to try and get people to eat. They loved it already, and I could just simply be like, yeah, you guys are eating something that's great for your health. Eat more of it. And they're like, yeah, we love it, so we'll eat more of it. And so 100 grams of this, you can see comparing it to spinach, it's pretty comparable to spinach, pretty much all the way across the board. I think, is there anything that's considerably different? I think vitamin K is the main one. Vitamin K is 100 grams of it has 950% of your daily need of vitamin K.
It's not as slimy.
It's not as slimy as spinach, exactly. It's not slimy at all. So, yeah, it's very, very, very tasty. And moringa. Tim talked about this tree. This is the tree that Clint introduced me to. This tree is another one of those wonder trees. Now, I found this chart. This is not my chart. I found this on the internet. Here's the link. Oh, no, actually, I posted a link here on my PowerPoint. And for anyone that wants my PowerPoint, because I did put some resources on, feel free to ask me for it, or ask I guess maybe I shouldn't offer your services, but ask me for it if you want the PowerPoint, and I'll share it with you. But there's a link here that has a lot better information to the nutritional information for ECHO, or for moringa, that was done by ECHO, which is the organization where Tim was at. And but this is something that I found on the internet that just has pretty good, I think it's probably approximately accurate, but as I did research on the internet, I found a lot of variance. So I can't guarantee that this is 100% right. I would probably recommend this link over that. Chaya, this is another one, and this is one that I would say has tremendous potential and can grow almost anywhere. This plant probably will grow anywhere from subtropical all the way to semi-arid, super dry areas. The one thing that I will say, and I want to say before I say anything else about this plant, you do need to boil this plant, and you do need to throw away the water from this plant when you eat it, because it has, what's the word, Tim? Has cyanide. Yes, it has a milk, like a sappy soil thing that's in the leaves, and when you boil, those cyanides go into the water. You dump the water out, and it's completely safe to eat it. One trick that my wife figured out about these, because I love eating this is probably my favorite green, and what my wife likes to do is she gets a whole pile of them and boils a big pot, and when she gets done boiling them, she puts them into baseball-sized balls and puts them in the freezer, and then when she makes lasagna or something, she gets a ball out, lets it thaw out, and puts it into the lasagna, and it works really good for her. But yeah, very nutritious, and I don't know that I'll take time. I don't think I'm going to take the time to go over and read all these things, but super nutritious and super drought tolerant. Very highly recommended. And then season stretching. This is a big one. One of the things that we're doing, and the first example that I'm going to show here, I have 3 examples that I'm going to talk about: avocados in Haiti, apples in temperate climates, and mangoes in tropical climates. Another thing that I added on there was beans. You can play with the seasons a little bit on beans, but this season stretching aspect is way less, what's the right word? It's much more, has much more potential working with perennial trees and stuff to stretch the seasons than you do with short life plants, because when you're dealing with beans, the time that you can plant the bean and its life cycle is going to be a little bit more limited. But for example, avocados, this is one in the school program that we're working with. This is one that we're focusing on. And this is a chart of avocado season in Florida. And Haiti is pretty similar. Traditionally, the avocado season in Haiti goes from right here, maybe starting in here, and goes to about right here. So it's about these avocados right in here. And we are working with avocados, the school students that are planting the trees. We are focusing on grafting avocados that stretch and bear starting in October and going all the way through April. So what we can do there is bring avocados into the season, and through this season right through here probably is when the dry season gets really bad, and then getting into planting season, January and February and March is when the biggest hunger season is in Haiti, where people struggle the most for malnutrition. And getting avocados that bear during that time can make a tremendous difference for a community economically and food security wise. And then apples, this is an example of like working in the tropics. Working in temperate climates. This is a chart from, according to the research that I did for Ohio, approximately speaking, everything from Lodi down to Granny Smith apples. You can see the season can start as early as July and go, I don't know, there's probably people that know a lot more about this than me, but the point of the subject is you can stretch the season with, depending on the varieties of apples that you're growing. And mangoes, again, mangoes are a little harder to do this with, but there are certain mangoes that will flower sporadically, and they have, it depends a little bit on where you're at too. For example, they have the mango francique, which is a mango from Haiti, and they say that in Florida, I think the season is from April to August, and in Haiti, it's almost year-round that it's available. So it depends a little bit on where you're at, but these things can, playing with the varieties of what you're working with can have a tremendous impact. So again, 4 categories of plants to emphasize: perennials, underutilized plants, nutrient dense, and season stretching. So I had these 2 pictures, and I think, is Riza still here or not? I think Riza left. I had just these 2 pictures that I was going to show, and I threw this picture in here because Riza talked earlier when he started with his talk. He said he worked for FIA in Honduras. This banana is a banana that the FIA organization in Honduras developed. This is a banana called FIA 25 that we grew in Haiti, and it was a monster. So I threw that in for him, but he's not here anymore. So again, I had the verse that Brother Dale started the conference with, that I had to close with. The earth is the Lord's, and the fullness thereof, the world and they that dwell therein. Psalms 24:1. So let's focus to try and do agriculture and do things in a way that are the way God designed them, in a way that glorifies Him and builds His creation. So with that, are there any questions? There's one back there.
What was it? I'm sorry, I didn't. Is that a question? So I just wondered, did the Haitians adopt like the plant diversity that you was talking about? And I don't know if you showed many pictures about that, but did they adopt this method pretty well, or how's that going?
So I started by saying that agroforestry is not a new method. Agroforestry was actually being done in Haiti before we were ever there. It's more bringing the agroforestry into it was more for us to maybe get a little bit of a comprehension of the system of how we're using it. In Haiti, it's been more like introducing like one plant here or one plant there, because the traditional ways of farming is very much along these lines.
Thank you for your presentation. All of what we've been hearing here today and certainly what you've been sharing with us are just, I think this is applicable for the whole world, and not just for countries where we want to serve, where there's hunger. Is there any interest like this in other parts of the world? How about here in America? Is there organizations that promote this here in America, and where are they doing it?
Yeah, I think In general, I think the regeneration movement is kind of regenerative agriculture movement is a pretty hot topic right now. You maybe even want to be careful where you say that, or people might write you off as a liberalist. But I think there are groups of people that are working with this type of stuff, and agroforestry and systems like this are way more developed for tropical and climates like that. There's not much being done. There are people doing it, but not much. I'm familiar with one permaculture institute in Missouri that's doing some agroforestry stuff, and I'm sure there are many, but it's not near as much in temperate climates as there it is in tropical climates. There's a question up here. It's a little bit easier in tropical climates too, because plants grow so much faster. So when you are dealing with tropical climates, things grow a little slower.
In growing your cover crops and multi-species diversity, how do you terminate the crop that you're growing cover crop for to plant the actual crop?
Like you're saying, like how do I determine which ones to plant?
Or maybe the question is, do you grow are there cover crops are being grown?
Yeah, I think like the important thing is when we're working in especially working in developing contexts, is where maybe you're pioneering the way, is figuring out what am I looking for, and then finding plants in the context where you're already at. Many times in the tropics, there are plants, green manure cover crops or whatever fancy word that you want to use. There's probably plants there in the area that will meet the needs, which is maybe like growing during the dry season or producing tons of biomass, or maybe some that decompose fast and some that decompose slow. So all those things, you're just going to have to kind of look for the things that you're looking for. Another one here.
There was a question about whether, are people adaptive to these things? And I guess I'll just say one thing. Sometimes we think that this is what they need. I know the moringa tree has been called the miracle tree of most missionaries. And yet, if the people don't want to use it, they can eventually learn to adopt it, but sometimes you're kind of beating your head against the wall if it's something they absolutely don't want.
Yeah, I think a big thing to that is getting them to connect the need, or connect what you have to a need that they have. So like one of those things is like what Terry was talking about, like the Che methods, is talking about the problem solution tree. When you go through and you say, well, what's the problem? And you trace it back to, well, it's malnutrition. Well, what do we have that can help us with malnutrition? And they're like, well, I've heard my grandma say that the moringa tree, just like they said in Africa, every Haitian knows that the moringa tree is super nutritious, and some of them use it. And so maybe like getting that's the more important part, is getting them to connect it to a problem that they have as a solution, more than if you're going and trying to incorporate, or to get them to incorporate an agroforestry system, a full-fledged agroforestry system. It's not going to work.
I just say that my guys, they went to a 4-day training on syntropic agroforestry, and they are pumped like they are doing.
Yeah. So you have situations where you have people that maybe go and see something, but like that, they came and saw it and maybe saw it working somewhere and were motivated and felt like they could do it. You didn't necessarily bring it to them and be like, hey, you guys should try this, and then try to convince them to do it. It was still on their own motivation that got them to buy into it. There was a question somewhere over here. I don't remember where. Okay, yeah, Weston.
Is it ever dangerous to introduce a new species into an area, and how do you know?
Yeah, it can be dangerous to introduce a new species into an area. Yeah, there are species that are invasive, and the important thing is you need to be careful about that. I think years ago, lots of development organizations really loved Lucena, and later on they figured out that Lucena maybe shouldn't be introduced just anywhere because it's very weedy and you can't get rid of it. So yeah, you need to be careful about that. Okay. Thanks for your time. God bless.